This is the first video we'll have for the weeks. We should have, I believe, 14 videos, one covering each week. Here's the goal. I'm going to really try to keep them short. Um, there's a lot of information and a lot of things occur during the course of the class that I think need to be discussed and talked about. But I do get some feedback that the videos aren't helpful or insightful, and they're too long. And the production quality isn't what some people expect. So we'll see if we can do this in a fashion that will make some sense. Each week, expect maybe just a brief discussion of what happened in the prior week, that maybe results of your writing assignments, what I'm seeing in papers, those kind of things. I'll take maybe a minute or two, hopefully. Last week was just introductions, and that being said, we can now move on to the next part of the course. The first chapter, basic introductory chapter, 4 main concepts. The concepts involve social control, the rule of law, discretion, and due process versus crime control. And I think each one of those factors are things that you should consider really hard and take some time on them outside of what you have in your reading, and don't just kind of blow through it and blow it off, because they ask some really serious social questions. The idea of social control, you remember from 101, 2 types, informal, informal. I'll use both PowerPoints from the publisher and then my own PowerPoints throughout the course. And hopefully they will be, they'll give you some insight as to what you might see in exams and what's important when you put it back with this. Still trying to figure out how to lay over audio onto these, and I'm not having a huge amount of success to get them uploaded. But then again, you'd be listening to me even longer than you have to with this. And so let's get back to social control. I found it interesting at least in the slide deck, that the concept of religious institutions has been dropped from the idea of informal social control. It's the first time I've noticed that, and I wonder why. Is it the perception of a lower state of involvement with people? Ask yourself. You may or may not be involved with a church, with religious beliefs. Kind of an interesting concept, or interesting thing that I don't know if there's a deeper meaning to or not. The second issue with social control is formal social control, and that is your institutions. Police are a function of formal social control. Courts are a function, and so are corrections. With the police, though, comes one additional thing, concept or characteristic, and that's the idea of coercive force. The police can use coercive force. So that's something that is a necessary part of policing and of government, but it is a key characteristic. Now, when we look at the other idea in that group of the culture of lawfulness, something that is exceptionally important, because the cops would simply be overrun. There's, I don't know, a few 100,000 people that are working in law enforcement, and they're outnumbered by probably 3 million people. So if this was God, I can't think of the name of the movie where it was all anarchy and social government was all gone, and that if it was Mad Max, that would be, the police would not be able to maintain control. So the next thing that we talk about is the rule of law. Now, what I've done with that is I've included two definitions. The first one comes from the book, and I gotta tell you, I think it's woefully short. I think that there is much more to it than what they say. And what they suggest is the rule of law, all people in society have an opportunity to participate in establishing the law. So in a representative democracy, I guess the argument is that we can elect or unelect people to legislative bodies, Congress or the legislature in a state level. Here's the one I really have trouble with. The rules apply equally to everybody. Boy, I don't know about that one. Because you see people, maybe the rules apply as they are in the book, meaning in statutes, like we have here, statutes like we have here. Perhaps that's what this is trying to say. But we know that when you put in human frailty into the decision-making process, you lose some of that. You lose that black and white of the statute. And we'll talk about discretion in a minute, but isn't discretionary behavior by institutions necessary? So I don't know about that. I think a better definition is the formal definition that I inserted into the slide deck. And it's that idea that government authority is legitimately exercised in accordance with written, publicly disclosed laws, adopted and enforced in accordance with established procedure. So what that means is you have a set of rules to make law. And in the United States, it's that representative democracy. So someone comes up with a law. It is discussed in the legislature. People that are interested can have input into that process through their representatives. And then the law is either enacted or tabled or some other fashion. It's not used, not fully developed. So that's one thing. The next part is that they're publicly disclosed. So you're not driving down the street and you have the police pull you over and they say, oh, the legislature enacted a law, a week ago that says skateboarding is a crime, I guess. Well, we know nobody's published it and it isn't really out there yet. But we're enforcing the law now. And of course you can see where that's not going to meet the test. And then finally, enforced in accordance with established procedure. That's going to be the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendment. And the 8th and such. But 4th, 5th, and 6th are the primary ways to lawfully enforce these things that have been developed by your representatives. The next idea, the third concept, is discretion. And it's throughout the criminal justice system. Discretion is in corrections. Within the discretion of the Federal Department of Corrections, the Epstein, the accused child molester, sex trafficker, was put into a cell with another person, and even after they being the Department of Corrections, were concerned about his mental stability. They determined that he was stable, and they returned him into this general population type cell, 2-person cell. And of course, we know that it was a mistake now, that he wasn't mentally stable. The discretionary act, when it comes to the courts, the prosecutor is, if you're in 301, you're going to talk about this quite a bit. The prosecutor has wide discretion and will decide to file some charges, not file other charges. Will decide on whether or not they're going to plea bargain. Is the plea bargain going to be a count bargain? Person gets arrested for multiple crimes, several counts, maybe one is dropped or 2 are dropped or whatever. Person pleads guilty to 1 crime. Charge. What is the person charged with? Is it domestic violence or is it simple battery in a plea bargaining environment? Length of sentence. And then there's a 4th, which is it's admission, regarding the admissions. So with that, that discretion in the judiciary, judges, discretion as to how they sentence. The famous case is the sexual assault that occurred on campus, and I want to say it was at Stanford, and the person was arrested, did a plea bargain, and then got a sentence which was considered by many to be way too lenient. So let's talk about the police. Cops have wide discretion. Who are they going to arrest? Who are they going to write citations to? What kind of preventive patrol activities are they going to undertake? Wide discretion. And when I worked, I could have as many as 20 people working under me at any particular time, and that was all field ops, field activities, and I was a supervisor, so I was responsible. And when shenanigans happen, and they do happen, when shenanigans happen, then management will look at the supervisor and see what are they doing. We had a case with an officer who had a sexual relationship with a woman in a patrol car, of all things, and she then later called and said that it wasn't consensual, that it was an assault. And not only was the officer fired and the woman given some monetary compensation, and the officer prosecuted. The supervisor was looked at to see how they had been doing on their level of supervision. So I think we'll talk more specifically about discretion a little bit later when we talk about the police personality. And then the last one is due process versus crime control. Due process, we were functioning under a quasi crime control model. By quasi, I mean you still had significant due process issues going on there, and you had the courts, which may or may not find particular activities by the police legal. Look at Arizona versus Gant, crime control era, 2006, I think the case is, and that overturned 40 plus years of settled law on searches incident to a lawful arrest. Very much a due process decision as opposed to a crime control decision. So get a good understanding of those 4 topics, and because as they say, you will see them again, and we'll talk. Actually, I believe your written assignment may involve some of this. So try to keep it short. With that, I'm going to try to get virtual office hours set up, and we will. That should be coming up in maybe even next week if I can get it to work out. Okay. With that, that's all she wrote.